On the evening of 14th of December 2025, a father and son positioned themselves on a pedestrian footbridge overlooking Bondi Beach as approximately 1,000 people gathered below to celebrate the first night of Hanukkah. The two men weren't there to observe the celebration, they were there to carry out a mass shooting. This documentary aims to present an honest and unfiltered account of the terrorist attack at Bondi Beach and the investigation surrounding Sajid Akram and Naveed Akram, the father and son responsible for Australia's deadliest anti-Semitic massacre outside Israel since October 7, 2023. Naveed Akram was documented as being 24 years of age at the time of the attack in December 2025. He was born in Australia and held Australian citizenship. Akram lived with his family in Bondi, a working-class suburb located approximately 35 kilometers west of Sydney's central business district. Until recently, he had been employed as a bricklayer, having worked a 6-year apprenticeship with the same employer. Colleagues described him as a quiet worker who kept to himself during lunch breaks and did not socialize with co-workers outside of working hours. In his spare time, Akram practiced boxing for fitness. In the month of November 2025, he reported to his employer that he had broken his wrist while boxing and would be unable to return to work until 2026. His father had a considerably different background. Sajid Akram, 50 years of age, was originally from the southern Indian city of Hyderabad. He immigrated to Australia in 1998 on a student visa before later obtaining a partner visa in 2001 after marrying an Australian citizen. Sajid maintained limited contact with his family in Hyderabad over the subsequent 27 years, visiting India on 6 occasions, primarily for family-related matters. He was a licensed firearms holder and had been a member of a shooting club for several years. 6 firearms were registered to his name. His son Naveed had also trained at the same shooting club. In the month of October 2019, the Australian Security Intelligence Organisation, ASIO, began a 6-month investigation into Naveed Akram. The investigation was triggered after police disrupted a Sydney-based Islamic State cell that year. Akram had been closely associated with members of the cell, including Isaac El-Matari, who was arrested in 2019 and later sentenced to 7 years in prison for declaring himself the Australian commander of Islamic State and planning terrorist attacks. Counter-terrorism officials also identified Akram's connection to Wissam Haddad, a cleric with long-standing ties to Australian extremists. Akram attended Haddad's Al-Madina Dawa Center and participated in street preaching activities for the Dawa Van organization. Despite these associations, ASIO concluded its investigation after 6 months. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese later stated that Akram was examined on the basis of being associated with others, and the assessment was made that there was no indication of any ongoing threat of him engaging in violence. Naveed Akram was not placed on a counterterrorism watch list. 5 years later, in the month of November 2025, the Akrams embarked on a trip that would become central to the investigation. Sajid and Naveed Akram arrived in the Philippines on 1 November 2025. Sajid traveled on an Indian passport, while his son used his Australian passport. The two men flew to Davao City, a coastal commercial center on the southern island of Mindanao. They checked into the GV Hotel, a budget accommodation in the downtown area. The Akrams initially booked an 8-day stay, but on the 8th day they extended their reservation to 20th November 2025, paying the remaining balance in cash. A hotel employee who gave his name as June later told investigators that the father and son rarely left the building during their stay. They would venture outside for approximately 1 hour each day before returning to their rooms. The pair had no visitors during the month-long stay. Hotel staff, who were permitted to clean the rooms daily, found only takeaway food packages from Jollibee, a local fast food chain. The purpose of the trip to the Philippines remains under investigation. Mindanao has historically been associated with Islamic extremist groups, including factions that have expressed allegiance to Islamic State. Upon their return to Australia, Naveed Akram informed his employer that he had suffered a broken wrist while boxing and would be unable to work until 2026. He requested that all of his employment entitlements be paid out, including his accumulated annual leave. His employer later recalled that while many employees made similar requests at the end of the year, the timing now appeared significant in retrospect. Around that same time, the Akrams relocated from their family home in Bondi to an Airbnb property in Campsie, a suburb considerably closer to Bondi Beach. The two men told family members they were going to Jervis Bay, a vacation destination halfway between Sydney and Canberra, for a weekend fishing trip. On Sunday, 14th of December 2025, Naveed called his mother. He rings me up and said, "Mum, I just went for a swim. I went scuba diving. We're going to eat now and then this morning, and we're going to stay home now because it's very hot." His mother Verena later told investigators the firearms Sajid legally owned and brought to the attack included a Beretta BRX-1 straight pull rifle and two Stoeger M3000 shotguns. That afternoon, the Akrams drove to Bondi Beach along Campbell Parade, the road running parallel to the shoreline. Two homemade Islamic State flags were displayed on their vehicle. Boris Gurman, 69, and his wife, Sophia, 61, a Russian Jewish couple who lived in the area, noticed the flags as the vehicle passed. As Sajid Akram exited the car, Boris Gurman moved to confront him and attempted to disarm him. Sophia joined her husband in the struggle. Dashcam footage from a nearby vehicle captured the confrontation. Both Boris and Sophia Gurman were shot and killed during the encounter, becoming the first fatalities of the attack. The attempt to stop the assault before it could escalate had failed. Minutes later, both gunmen positioned themselves on the pedestrian footbridge overlooking Archer Park. The footbridge provided an elevated position overlooking Archer Park, where approximately 1,000 people had gathered for the annual Chanukah by the Sea event organized by Chabad of Bondi. Witnesses reported that the gunmen shouted "Allahu Akbar" as they opened fire into the crowd below. The attack lasted approximately 10 minutes. 15 people were killed, including children, families, and elderly attendees. 42 others sustained injuries requiring hospitalization. The victims ranged in age from 10-year-old Matilda Britvan to 87-year-old Alexander Kleitman, a Holocaust survivor. Among those killed was Rabbi Eli Schlanger, 41, the assistant rabbi at Chabad of Bondi who had organized the event. His wife and 5 children, including an infant just 2 months old, were present at the celebration. Also killed was Dan El-Kayam, 27, a French citizen who had been playing football with friends before the shooting began. Police later discovered improvised explosive devices in the vehicle belonging to the attackers. As the gunfire continued, New South Wales police officers arrived at the scene. Officers engaged the gunmen on the footbridge, armed with standard-issue handguns against the attackers' long-range rifles. An exchange of gunfire ensued. Sajid Akram was shot and killed by police during the confrontation. Naveed Akram sustained critical injuries and was taken into custody. 2 police officers were shot during the engagement and transported to hospital in serious condition. Both officers survived their wounds. During the attack, a bystander identified as Ahmad al-Ahmad, 43, physically confronted one of the gunmen and wrestled a weapon away from him before being shot multiple times in the shoulder. New South Wales Premier Chris Minns later defended the police response, stating that officers engaged the gunmen on the footbridge with handguns, while the offenders had long-range rifles. He noted that the officers were shot in the front as they confronted the attackers. At approximately 7:37 p.m. local time, police announced that 2 individuals were in custody at Bondi Beach. By 9:00 p.m. local time, police confirmed an initial death toll of 9 people, a number that would later increase to 15 as additional victims succumbed to their injuries in hospital. At 9:36 p.m., authorities declared the incident a terrorist attack. Lifeguards from the nearby Bondi Surf Lifesaving Club had responded immediately during the shooting, using surfboards as makeshift stretchers to transport wounded victims while depleting the club's first aid supplies. Approximately 250 people were given shelter inside the club building, including a heavily pregnant woman who went into labor during the attack. The beach area remained cordoned off with police tape for several days as investigators processed the scene. Personal belongings abandoned by fleeing attendees, shoes, towels, and bags, remained scattered across the sand throughout the investigation. Evidence of the attack's premeditated nature became apparent as investigators examined the scene. Police recovered 2 homemade Islamic State flags from the vehicle used by the attackers. 4 firearms were seized at the scene. 3 had been used during the assault, while a 4th was located nearby. Bomb disposal teams removed improvised explosive devices from the car. As part of the investigation, police executed search warrants at 2 properties connected to the Akrams. Officers raided the family home in Bondi as well as the Airbnb accommodation in Campsie, where the pair had been staying in the weeks prior to the attack. Australian Federal Police Commissioner Chrissy Barrett stated that early indications pointed to a terrorist attack inspired by Islamic State. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese confirmed there was no evidence the attackers had been part of a wider cell. The investigation was designated Operation Arquez. In the days following the attack, Naveed Akram remained in critical condition under police guard at a Sydney hospital. Akram remained unconscious for 3 days following the shooting. On 17th of December 2025, he awoke from his coma. New South Wales Police Commissioner Mal Lanyon stated that authorities had delayed charging Akram until he demonstrated appropriate cognitive ability. It's important he has appropriate cognitive ability. For his fairness, we need him to understand what is exactly happening, Lanyon explained. Later that same day, police formally charged Naveed Akram with 59 offenses. The charges included 15 counts of murder, 40 counts of causing grievous bodily harm with intent to murder, 1 count of committing a terrorist act, 1 count of discharging firearms, 1 count of placing explosives, and 1 count of publicly displaying a terrorist organization symbol. Akram did not request bail during his brief court appearance, as the offenses carry a maximum possible sentence of life imprisonment. He was scheduled to face court again on 8th of April 2026. He is expected to remain under police guard in hospital until he is well enough to be transferred to a correctional facility. As the legal proceedings commenced, the community began the process of laying their dead to rest. The first funeral was held on 17th of December 2025 for Rabbi Eli Schlanger, the 41-year-old assistant rabbi at Chabad of Bondi who had organized the Chanukah by the Sea event. London-born Schlanger was survived by his wife and 5 children, including an infant just 2 months old. He had also served as a chaplain in prisons across New South Wales and in a Sydney hospital. His father-in-law, Rabbi Yehoram Ullman, spoke at the service. After what happened, my biggest regret was, apart from, obviously, the obvious, I could have done more to tell Eli more often how much we love him, how much I love him, how much we appreciate everything that he does, and how proud we are of him, Ullman stated. A series of funerals followed under tight security, Jewish tradition typically requires burial within 24 hours of death, but the funerals were delayed by coroner investigations. Hundreds of mourners gathered to bury their dead as a growing floral memorial took shape at the Bondi Pavilion. The community pledged that the 31-year-old Chanukah by the Sea celebration would continue in defiance of the attack. The tragedy immediately raised serious questions about how such an attack could have been prevented. Political leaders faced intense scrutiny over why Sajid Akram had been permitted to maintain a firearms license despite his son's 2019 investigation by intelligence agencies. When pressed on the matter, Prime Minister Albanese stated it was important that the authorities be enabled to do their work, but declined to provide details beyond confirming the timeline of the investigation. New South Wales Premier Chris Minns announced his determination to introduce what he described as the toughest gun laws in Australia. Albanese proposed several measures, including restrictions on the number of firearms an individual could own, limitations on firearm types, and a requirement that gun ownership be restricted to Australian citizens, a measure that would have excluded Sajid Akram, who held permanent residency but not citizenship. The government also proposed incorporating criminal intelligence into licensing decisions, which could allow an applicant's family associations to affect their eligibility. A national gun registry, which had been discussed for years, was identified as a priority. UN Special Rapporteur Ben Saul called for an independent investigation into whether authorities had missed opportunities to prevent the attack. The most obvious victims were the 15 people killed and 42 injured in the attack. The victims ranged in age from 10-year-old Matilda Britvan to 87-year-old Alexander Kleitman, a Holocaust survivor. The attack occurred during the first night of Hanukkah at a celebration that had been held annually for 31 years. Among those killed were French, Slovak, and Israeli citizens, alongside Australian residents. The dead included religious leaders, parents, grandparents, and children. As of 19th of December 2025, 15 people remained hospitalized with injuries sustained during the shooting. The attack represented the deadliest anti-Semitic massacre outside Israel since October 7, 2023, and marked one of Australia's bloodiest mass shootings in decades. The Jewish community expressed concerns about safety at religious and cultural events, with many questioning whether adequate security measures had been in place for a gathering of such size and significance. The secondary victim wasn't an individual per se, but the broader sense of security among Jewish Australians. The Bondi Beach attack occurred against a backdrop of escalating anti-Semitic incidents across Australia. Less than 2 weeks earlier, on 6 December 2024, an arson attack targeted the Adass Israel Synagogue in Melbourne. In the month of August 2025, ACO Director General Mike Burgess confirmed that the Iranian government, specifically the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, had been responsible for that attack, as well as an incident at Continental Kitchen in Sydney. As a consequence of these findings, Iranian Ambassador Ahmad Sadeghi was expelled from Australia, and the IRGC was officially listed as a terrorist organization. The series of attacks prompted a national discussion about rising anti-Semitism and whether government responses had been adequate. The targeting of a public Hanukkah celebration represented an escalation in both scale and lethality. The case immediately raised serious questions about systemic failures in Australia's counter-terrorism apparatus. The 2019 ASIO investigation into Naveed Akram came under immediate scrutiny. The 6-month examination had concluded with an assessment that Akram posed no ongoing threat and did not warrant placement on a counter-terrorism watch list. Prime Minister Albanese told ABC that Australia's intelligence systems would require re-examination. "We need to examine exactly the way that systems work," Albanese stated. We need to look back at what happened in 2019 when this person was looked at, the assessment that was made. ASIO Director General Mike Burgess confirmed that one of the gunmen had been known to the agency but was not considered an immediate risk at the time. Counter-terrorism experts questioned whether the closure of the investigation had been premature given Akram's documented associations with convicted extremists, including Isaac El-Matari, who had declared himself the Australian commander of Islamic State and was serving a 7-year prison sentence. Beyond intelligence failures, the firearms licensing system faced criticism. Sajid Akram first applied for a firearms license in 2015, but the application lapsed in 2016 after he failed to provide a required photograph. He submitted a second application in 2020, and the license was issued in 2023. All 6 firearms registered to him were legally held, and Commissioner Lanyon confirmed that the firearms that we have seized were attached to that license appropriately. Both Sajid and Naveed had trained at the same shooting club. The licensing process included no mechanism to cross-reference family members with active intelligence investigations or counter-terrorism assessments. Political leaders proposed reforms including restricting firearm ownership to Australian citizens, incorporating criminal intelligence into vetting procedures, and establishing cross-checks for family associations. The number of gun licenses in New South Wales had increased from 181,000 in 2001 to 260,000 in 2025, despite strict controls implemented after the 1996 Port Arthur massacre. The Bondi Beach attack does not exist in a vacuum. The trip to the Philippines placed the attack within a broader pattern of international terrorism. The southern island of Mindanao, where the Akrams stayed in Davao City, has historically been associated with Islamic extremist groups. The Islamic State of East Asia, ISIA, an ISIS affiliate operating in the Philippines, has been listed as a terrorist organization by the Australian government since 2017. In 2017, ISIS-linked militants laid siege to the city of Marawi on Mindanao, prompting months of combat with government forces that resulted in more than 1,000 deaths. While Philippine authorities have significantly degraded these groups in recent years, they continue to operate as smaller cells in remote regions. The 2025 Global Terrorism Index ranked the Philippines 20th out of 79 nations for terrorism impact, down from 9th in 2019. Philippine officials rejected characterizations of their country as an ISIS training ground and stated there was no evidence the Akrams had received training during their visit. What are your thoughts on the measures needed to prevent future attacks of this nature? Share your perspectives in the comments below. If you found this documentary informative, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more in-depth explorations of often overlooked, lesser-known stories. Who else would you like to see us detail next? Your engagement helps us continue to shed light on otherwise unheard narratives.